continuity. Now, with measures taken here at home, has South Africa done enough to soften the blow? Now, there are so many articles doing the round, some suggesting that government and the private sector must introduce business continuity measures and to introduce some sort of reforms to cushion that blow even further. So we join now for this conversation by Saftu, Zwelinzima, Vavi, and of course economist Miyelani Mkhabela. Thanks so much to both of you for your time and speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Thanks for the view.
Thank you very much for.
So I'm going to start by giving each of you an opportunity to just give us a snapshot. Given that people are so concerned, especially business owners, the smaller ones more so, very concerned about the raft of measures that have been put forward by government. Please give us your overview on these measures that government have adopted, both positive and negative. Mr. Vavi, let me start with you.
Let me start with the crisis at hand. Saftu is fully behind the calls government have been making that South Africa must be more conscious and must follow the measures that have been proclaimed by the government. And there's no debate about that. I mean, South Africa and the world is facing the greatest danger humankind have ever faced in the history of the humankind. So there is no debate about that. The issue that we want to raise now is that whilst we support the measures, including the lockdown that starts on Thursday night, we believe that society is being asked to make contributions and sacrifices in a manner that is completely disproportional. In this way, the state and the corporations contribution to the crisis is going to be far less than how ordinary people and workers are going to be impacted upon by the lockdown and by the economic meltdown that is going to follow thereafter. We're saying this from the start. We are in a crisis as we speak. We have been in a crisis during apartheid and the colonial era. That crisis in terms of unemployment, poverty, and inequalities have continued deep into democracy, making South Africa one of the countries with worst unemployment in the world and number one country in the whole world when it comes to inequalities. Now, with that background of a job loss bloodbath underway as we speak before the lockdown, you can imagine what this lockdown is going to mean to ordinary people. We are absolutely disappointed by the tokenist approach that the state and the corporations have followed in response to the lockdown.
What do you mean by a tokenist approach? What do you mean by a tokenist approach, Mr. Vavi?
The 12 billion rands, because that's what it means. They are putting aside 12 billion rands to cushion the economy, to cushion workers and against the impact of a lockdown. 12 billion rands in the context of what we're going to witness is absolutely something that you can't even describe. It's a non-issue, it's a non-response. It's not going to make any difference. And to in particular workers in the informal sector, in particular workers who are waste pickers, who are waking up every morning to go and salvage our dustbin, the workers who are in the other informal sectors of the economy, what we call the survivalist sectors, they are not going to be catered for by the UIF or any kinds of a compensation. They are on their own. They must stay at home, and they will feel by Saturday that there is a big difference between sitting at home and standing in the street corner and cutting people's heads. That's our problem. Now let's compare our 12 billion rand, Sakina, a little bit to what is happening elsewhere in the world. Our 12 billion rand constitutes a mere 0.23% 0.23% of our GDP. In Britain, led currently by one of the most conservative leaders of the Conservative Party in history, that country is putting aside a 16% of the GDP to intervene. Now, if we were to do a straight trade of calculating the South Africa's GDP and their GDP and the measures they are announcing, you will see that South Africa would have to put aside a 838 billion rands as a stimulus package to cushion us against the impact of a close down.
Which is, of course, money we know we don't have, Mr. Vavi. But hold that thought, because
that's a misnomer. We do have lots of money. I'll come back to that question.
We will come back to it. I want to bring Miyelani in here. Miyelani Mkhabela, you, of course, feel that this hasn't been rolled out yet, and you think the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. Give us your view, please.
Thanks, Sakina and the viewers. What I can say is, first, we appreciate the President for what he has announced with regard to the complete lockdown for the 21 days. And actually, looking at what as well my article for the 17th of March has shared, it was such a recommendation that a coronavirus impact fund be created, and that it was looked as something that can assist when you look on the global market, departing mainly from the European Central Bank, because they came up with a model that we believe it will work, that was researched in a scenario of the 2008 global financial crisis, when they come up with a 14 trillion de-risking fund to assist their corporate. And then when you look at South Africa now, we look at us having contributed this 12 billion, of which two private individuals has contributed 2 billion, which is 1 billion each. But when you look on the contribution from the South African economy, the amount happens to be very small. 12 billion is very small, and you will look at private sector to commit enough funds because they have enough coffers. I mean, we have a big private sector that if one, if you look at all listed companies, they will have contributed far much better than that. Even if it can probably be something like 500 billion, it was supposed to be better. But 13 billion, it's more of a small private equity. A small private equity firm will get to fundraise that amount. I just want to give you a shape of what I'm indicating. When you look at mining sector, mining workers a year, they earn 126 billion a year, only mining sector. And that will give you an understanding of 13 billion, it being very small, and then looking at 14 trillion that the ECB has committed, which, it gives you a good understanding that they have tried to their best. But when you look on the other side with the South African government has done very well, looking at the central bank or the Reserve Bank cutting the repo rate by 100 basis points, and you look at our inflation at a very good level, and then when you look at the impact that will happen in general, the tourism and hospitality sector is going to be losing a lot of jobs, because you calculate almost around 40% of tourism and hospitality to be cut off, and then retailers are already experiencing problems. When you look at Sandton, some of the shops, which are our middle types of a shop, they just experience about 10 visitors a day. And those 10 visitors doesn't mean that people are buying. And when you look at retailers are already affected. Small businesses will be impacted a lot because they don't have insurance or reinsurance or balance sheet strategies when these types of issues come into place. So these are issues that will be impacted, and you look at the mining sector to be going for a close down as well. It's a sector that has been impacted a lot. Mining sector was contributing around 21% to GDP 1980, and then it was contributing 7% GDP 2016, and then now you look at a sector that went down with around 13%, which is from 2013 to 2018, and that, in essence, you will see that if that if that sector goes down deeper, it will cause a lot of disruptions. And on the other hand, you look on the fourth industrial revolution, that it is there to be replacing workers, because the South African approach is not really focused much on the human-centered approach. When South African corporates look on the fourth industrial revolution, they think the fourth industrial revolution is mainly machines. But the fourth industrial revolutions, when you even look on the approach of the International Monetary, the approach of the International Labour Organization, or ILO, it will be that of a human-centered approach,
okay,
which balances needs to be taken into consideration.
So I think great snapshots provided by both of you. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritties here, because businesses, especially the small, medium and micro enterprises, not to say that big business isn't affected. As you mentioned, Miyelani, you look at the mining sector and what it's going to take, what it's going to cost to restart those operations after this lockdown. It's going to be massive. But let's focus for a moment on the SMMEs and the measures that were announced yesterday, because everybody was watching that ministerial briefing, looking for some sort of relief to come out of that. The measures taken by Minister Ibrahim Patel, for example, some saying very broad, but how will we actually see them factored down to the businesses that actually need to benefit from there? Speak to us, Mr. Vavi. How is that going to happen?
There will be very little impact of the measures that were announced by the minister, announced by the president. The source is that there is just no resources that are being made aside to aggressively address the fact that many of the small businesses will simply not survive 21 days. And it's not just going to be about 21 days, Sakina. Beyond the 21 days, they will find out their sources, meaning where they used to source their products, have been damaged, some of them beyond a point of recovery. We're going to see a massive crisis beyond the 21 days, and we are extremely disappointed that the measures that are announced, both to address the plight of the small, medium, macro enterprises, but also to address the poor in our country. The poor are being left in their own devices. Nobody is speaking on their behalf. Nobody talks to them. Nobody even cares to consult with them. All of the discussions that are taking place between big business and the government are happening behind the backs of the informal sector, behind the backs of the poorest of the poor, above the heads of even organized workers. We are amongst those that are not even being consulted. We were supposed to have a meeting today, for example, with the president. It got cancelled because indeed it was going to be a meeting to do what? Because every measure has already been announced without any consultation with other sections of workers. The mine workers union, AMCO, is not being consulted. And even the small businesses, the black businesses, the black agricultural sector is not being consulted. Everything is being concluded between big business and the state. And that's why you see the inadequacy of the measures, because it is the people who are around the table that are making sure that their own interests are looked after. And they have succeeded. For example, look at the other things that every other country have done. Every country have simply slashed the interest rates. We now have an interest rate of 5.23%. when America, Britain, Europe have their interest rates hovering around 1 to 0%. That measure alone shows you that the interests that are being catered for are those that of the multimillionaires and multi-billionaires, the financial sector who benefits from a high interest rate regime. The people who are desperately in need of money today, the small, medium, macro enterprises, and the workers who are not even given an interest rates repayment holiday or bond repayment holidays, are being asked to continue to face the rest of the banks and who continue to smile all the time as if there's no crisis at all in the country. And that's a big disappointment.
Mr. Vavi, just to bring Miyelani in again, because there's a lot of interest as well in what the President has called the Solidarity Fund. Now, how exactly is that going to work? How will it be disbursed? Because people are looking for relief, Miyelani.
The problem that we'll have, Sakina, is systems that will be used to disburse or allocate these funds from impacted SMEs. If I can indicate that the amount itself, even if it was supposed to only cater SMEs, it was not supposed to assist them. It was not supposed to assist 10% of the SMEs that we have in the country. I will start there. And then the second element is the employees that SMEs currently employed, like the whole figure, if they will have to be assisted as well, this amount can't cater, because when you look on an amount that, it's less, it's about, you speak about 10% of what the mining sector is allocating the whole year. That gives you an understanding that the amount is still very small, of which SMEs will probably struggle a lot. With regard to DTI, or Department of Small Medium Enterprises, they don't have a system to be taking care of small businesses on every 3-month basis or on a quarterly basis. So when they don't have that, the process that they will take in taking care of all these small businesses, it will be a difficult process as well for them, because they have been done it. They never responded on SMEs for all these years, and this catastrophe find them at a very, very bad time where these matters were not anticipated for, or there were no systems in place. So if they were having a customer relations management system or a tool that they have packaged to access the small businesses, they were supposed to be the ones at times looking at the impact of small businesses and the phases on how they are going to attend to them. And such things are not there. I think that is the important part that we have like a challenge. And when you look on medium businesses that happen to be lucky, having probably a proper financial record of 6 months to 3 years. I will probably say medium enterprises, which are a bit bigger, they can get help clearly, but the system that they will need to use for small businesses in terms of assessing impact, it won't really work at the current moment, because the very same people, some they don't really understand what is happening, and they are still trying to open their businesses so that they can get clients and they can service their clients. So that's not a problem at all.
Please hold the line for me. If you and Mr. Vavi can both just stay with us, we'll do another 5 minutes after the break, because I think it's very important just to get at least some clarity, some understanding about some of these stimulus measures announced by government and the impact that it's likely to have on business, what sort of relief is available and whether it's going to be enough or not. So Miyelani Mkhabela is an economist and Saftu's General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi with us for this conversation. But let's bring you news now with Leanne.